And did you get the sign? No. Has anybody ever done that? How did it?
Oh, yeah. Did the sign-in list go around?
It did. Just missed one.
Oh, okay. Make sure you get on it. That kind of was obvious, wasn't it? Okay, so in our class today, in our folder for today, there is a folder that you should have in there called 940copy.psd. Do you guys have that? Then if you could open that guy up for me, please. I'm going to get rid of this other. Okay, and if you get this open and you, yeah. So did everybody have this file open? Again, it's 940copy.psd, and when you open it up, it looks blue. That's basically what you should have in here. Great, thanks. All right, so everybody's got this, right?
No.
You good? Okay. So if we look through this, what you'll basically see is there is smart object at the bottom. It's the only eyeball that's on. It's actually a picture of blue sky. I've gone in and fucked with the color. If you double click on it, you'll see that it actually is a smart object, and it'll bring you in. This is the raw file. So I shot a picture of blue sky, but I shifted the color. I actually didn't keep this as the normal color. I've shifted it to, I was actually trying to emulate a color of a photographer who shoots a lot for Bazaar that I really liked the color of her sky. So that's basically what's going on here. If you then ignore the gradient that's right above it, don't click on that layer number 1, but go to the one that's just past it, the one that's actually got, it's got sort of like this white on it, and then it's got a mask that's got a big X on it. The X on it is actually hiding this mask. If you hold on the Shift key and click on that X, it goes away, and you'll see basically what this is. So this was on the rooftop of my old house. This was a model that I made out of foam core. So what you're looking at is a foam core construction that's about, well, it's about this size. So it's about this big. So I cut it out of foam core. I took it upstairs on top of my roof under available light and shot a picture of it. Then I brought it into Photoshop and I created a mask for it. And then I created this sky, because what I was thinking here, what I was really trying to do is, you know, all those pictures you see of like Albuquerque that are just like those sort of like white rooftops and just with sky. That was sort of the environment that I wanted to work in, right? I didn't want to fly to Albuquerque. So anyway, so this was my solution to the whole thing to do this. There is a little bit, there's a little bit of, you can, if you zoom in really close to this, you can actually spot some of the edge of the foam core that I wanted to clean up. So if you click on the next layer up above that, that actually retouched that whole part out. And then finally, if you double click on the hand to see the entire image all at once, if you click on the gradient now, you'll see that what it was really designed to do was emulate how blue sky actually works. So this was what I used to create my my fake Albuquerque place. And you can see, I don't know if you guys can see on yours. Yeah, you can actually see on yours pretty well, whatever. It's harder to see it on my laptop screen. It's actually easier to see it on this projector screen. But you can see basically what it is there's a floor here, and then a wall that goes up, and then there's this sort of another background wall that's actually behind here, and then blue sky. That's basically what's going on here. So you guys can spot the floor, right? Where the floor sort of intersects this back wall, right? So it's a very similar situation to what I've got, what I was just showing you with the remote control against the wall in terms of what we were going to do. So at the very top of this, Lindsay?
Wait, what is this supposed to look like?
A place?
Yeah,
Yeah, is this like, would the people be tiny in here, or what is this?
If you click on the body at the very top, you see what they're supposed to be.
Looks like she's standing on a roof.
It looks like she what?
No, I was just saying now it looks like she's standing on a roof, right?
Yeah, there you go, right? Okay, so this is my composite that I want to drop in here, and this for me was about scale. I was thinking that the wall, the horizontal wall that was in the back would be something, well, like this, something like this size right here that you could like lean on, right? And then who knows, the thing that's going up, it's the roof line. I don't know what it is. It just is what it is, right? It didn't have to be that specific. Okay, so that's the whole idea. So I want to, again, ground this girl into space. I need to build shadows to actually do this. What is my first move with this? What would you guys do first in looking at this? What would be your first move in terms of how to go about doing this? Say what? Okay, you would figure out light source, right? So what is the light source in the image that is we'll call it the rooftop? Where's the light coming from in the rooftop? It's coming from the right side, down, right? So is the lighting on the girl correct? What's wrong with it? It's coming from the other side. These lights are exactly crossing with each other. Now, I don't know why this is, but I always have a really hard time understanding where shadows are, lighting shadows are on faces. I look at this girl's face, and if you remove the entire rest of her body, if you couldn't see the whole rest of her body, whatever, I would say, oh, okay, the light on her face is relatively flat. It's coming from above. It's more like a beauty light, blah, blah, blah. It's hard for me. That's just me. I admit that to you guys, right? But if you look at her body, there's absolutely no question about how the lighting is falling on it. If you look at the shadow on her legs specifically, there's no doubt about how this is happening. If you look at the shadow on her arms, there's no doubt about this is happening. And it's the exact opposite of what's happening in this space. So our first move in this is to either flip the background or flip the girl. The girl is not wearing anything that means I can't flip her. If she was wearing something that had a logo on it, that had type, I wouldn't be able to flip her. I'd do the background instead. If she had, say what? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so in this case, we don't have to worry about any of that. So if you select the body as an entire group, come up to the edit menu, down to transform, down to flip horizontal. She goes in the other direction. And now she's actually in the light correctly. And right off the bat, things start looking a little bit better. So that would be the first place that I would actually go. If you click on the drop down to open up the body, you'll actually see there was some puppet warping done here at one point. So this girl has been knocked out. There was some puppet warping, like I say, that was done in here. There was some retouching. There was a little bit of airbrushing. And then there was a color correction that was actually put on all of this. That's just to give you some idea of what's going on inside all of this. And what I'm going to do, because I'm a little bit nervous about everything that's going on in here, I'm going to go ahead and merge all of this into a single image. So to do that, I want you to turn off everything except for the body group. So the body group is just on its own. Kim, was that a hand up or?
No.
Okay. The body group is on it, completely on its own. Everything else is turned off. Make sure that everything in the body group is turned on. And then I'm just going to collapse the body group. And again, at the very top with the group selected, hold down the Command Option Shift and hit the letter E, and it will put the girl up on her own layer all by herself. Yes? Oh. Because we flipped the wrong thing. So go back in history to when it just opened up. Okay. And then turn on, click on the X box so that you get that part on. And then click on just the body.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, and then the body is up to edit, down to transform, flip horizontal. And you're good to go.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So at any rate, now I need to make a copy of just the girl. So turn everybody else off.
Okay.
Perfect. And then again, that part's selected. No, leave it at the top.
Okay.
Hold down Command, Option, Shift, and hit the letter E. And that's her all by herself now.
Oh, okay.
And then go ahead and turn the body off so that you don't see it. So guys, once you do this, turn the body group off that made this. So we've just got these two things separate from one another. And then go ahead and turn everybody else back on, turn on the whole background. It's just easier to do it this way. Things can get complicated when you've got 4 or 5 layers that are making up a body and you're trying to do this kind of stuff that we're trying to do right here. So, sure. Okay, everything in there is fine. So yeah, and you're fine. You can just collapse the body group and hold down Command, Option, Shift, E.
Doesn't appear.
That's all on. Let's see if we can do it at the very top here. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. There's something wrong. I would restart. So in Elizabeth's case right here, hers will not do a merge tape version. In that case, I would quit Photoshop, hold down. I can never remember this. That's why I keep it on the very front page. So hit the V key. Okay, hit the V key and then try it. No, okay. Anyway, don't worry, because the one that I know, the one thing you need to look out for, so don't worry about it. Okay. Yeah, we were doing the right keyboard. It's just not working. Okay, so our first move into this is a relatively hard light. You can see there's a really clean edge right here. So again, it's sunlight, it's daylight. So it's relatively sharp shadow. So that's basically what we need to work with. So in order to do this, I need to make a selection of this girl first. So I'm simply going to hold down the Command key and click on this to load her as a selection. Elizabeth, in your case, you want to do the Puppet Warp version. I think that's the one you want to load. Yeah. Okay. So then you want to come underneath that layer and create a blank new layer underneath this. Again, this is where we're going to put our shadows. Shadows need to go on top of the background, but underneath the body. And so in that new layer with this selection active, hit the D key to make sure that your background foreground colors are at their default. Make sure that black is your foreground color. A blank layer underneath it, because I've got to create a shadow. If I copy the girl, I don't have a shadow. I've got to copy the girl. Right? Because I'm now going to fill it with black. So, Option Delete fills this thing with black. So guys, look up at my screen. This is all I have done. I needed a black. I'm going to turn off the girl on the top. I needed a black version of her underneath. This sounds so racist. I needed a shadow version of her underneath her. That's all I've done. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to do it again just so you guys see what's going on here. Let's do it a different way. I'm going to select the very top of my background, and then I'm going to add a blank layer on top of that. And I'm going to rename that blank layer Shadow 1. Make sense? Okay, I need to fill this with black. So, and I want it to be in the shape of the girl. So I'm going to Command click to load her as a selection. Here in shadow number 1, I'm simply going to fill it with black. Now, you can't see it because the version of the girl, the pixel version of the girl is covering it. But that's all I've got going. Does everybody have this? Oh, are we good? It has to be underneath the girl on top of the background, exactly where shadows would fall. Right? You would never have a shadow in front of the girl. The light's coming from the front of the girl. The only reason you'd have a shadow coming in front would be if it was backlit. So we good? I need you to make a copy of this shadow layer by simply dragging it down and name it Shadow 2. Okay, we good on this? All righty then. First things first that we're going to do on this is we are going to set Shadow 2. So what I need to do is make sure that Shadow 2 is active. hit the V key to get the move tool, and simply drag it out and bring it over here onto the back wall. And then say to yourself, how would this shadow actually fall on this back wall? You need to like look at the girl in relationship to this. How would this actually happen? So the light's coming from up here at the top and it's coming down. Does that mean her head would be at the same height as her head here? No. And again, you can whip out your little, your little flashlight, and you can hold your little guy right here on the wall, and you can hit it like this, and you can see that, no, lo and behold, the shadow, her head has to be lower. It cannot be where it is right now. The other thing is that the light is also coming from the side. So this guy has got to come down a little bit more like this. That's more sort of where this guy would actually be, I think. Also, if the light's coming straight down like this, so that's what I'm trying to look at the whole time. I'm trying to say, where is this thing actually dropping down on her? Where does this actually happen on her? Where would that light happen on her? Now, in some cases, you could actually bring it up like this if you felt like, okay, depending on her distance away from this, that would be how I would think about doing it. However, her body is also, this isn't going to be perfectly upright. This is actually going to be slightly twisted. So I am going to hit Command T to transform this, and I'm going to slightly rotate it because I think that's how that light would actually be coming down and hitting her body, is a little bit something more like that. So that's going to be my first shadow, and it goes onto the back wall. However, I've got a problem with this back wall, and the back wall, matter of fact, I'm going to move her even closer. Yeah, that feels a little bit better. Again, light coming down like this. And, guys, I wish I could tell you an easier or better way of doing it, but it's not. You just got to kind of like look at these things and decide how this is going to be. Does this coming down, does that line coming down feel similar to this line coming down right here? She actually might even be in a little bit closer than like that. It might actually be a little bit more like that. I'm trying to look at the line of the existing shadows that actually exist there. So that's sort of where I'm going to leave mine. It looks like that. That's how I'm going to do mine. Okay. So that's my first shadow down. However, again, we've got a compound shadow here where the wall is down here at the bottom where it meets the ground. At this point right down here, the shadows would no longer be coming straight out. The shadows here would be coming actually towards her body, not coming straight down like they are. So I need to get rid of the shadow that is actually on the floor. To do that, I have already made you a series of selections in your channels. So scroll down to the bottom of your selection of your channel palette. We're going to actually load the one that's called back wall. We're going to load that. So simply Command click to load back wall. Come over to your shadows number 2 and apply as a layer mask. And you can see that it's now leaving the shadow. It's got it off the floor. It's actually on the back wall, which is exactly what we wanted it to be. Make sense? Okay. Back on the shadow wall, I'm going to unchain the link between the shadow mask, the mask of that back wall, and the girl, because I think the girl still needs to be transformed a little bit more. As this light is coming across the side of her like this, it's actually not hitting her straight on. It's not a light that would be, so for instance, look at the light that's hitting me right now. The light that's hitting me that's going onto this back wall is the wall that's, the shadow that's behind me is exactly the size that I am. But if you were to come here and actually have a shadow that was coming to the side, thanks. I know, right? Okay, here. Just take a look at this. This is now my figure. Again, hopefully you can see this one here. If you had it on the back wall like that, the shadow was directly on it, and then the shadow that's on the wall would be exactly the same size as this guy right here. But when you bring this thing to the side like this, it actually gets skinnier because you're not throwing the entire shadow like that. You're actually throwing it to the side. If you go all the way to the side like that, it gets to be really narrow. So we need to narrow this girl up slightly. The reason that you want to break the link right here between the mask and the girl on the back wall is if this thing remains linked and we transform the shadow here, it will also transform the mask. And you do not want to do that because the mask is in perfect register. So make sure that the girl actually is the active one. The pixel layer is active. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. And I'm simply going to squish her a little bit. And that's it. And I'll go ahead and hit the command key to do that. So I just compressed her a little bit is all I actually did on this. The return key. Okay, so that gets me part number 1. Part number 2, though, is the part that has now got to connect the bottom of this girl's feet to this figure right here. That's going to be the one that we marked as shadow number 1. So to get shadow number 1 to move, make it active, and then again, simply straight to Command T. With Command T selected, you will notice that there's a little diamond, sort of star-shaped box right in her crotch. That is the point at which this transform rotates around. So you can see if you bring your cursor outside of this figure and twist it, that the shadow that's back behind her is rotating around that point. That is not what I want to do. What I want to do is rotate this around her feet. So if you click on that point and you drag it down and put it right between her toes at the very bottom, now when you click this dialog box and drag down, it drops it off of her legs like this. It drops it off of her feet down like this to the point that you come down and you can actually start to line these shadows up. Does that make sense? Okay, finally, we need to do some very serious correction on this. However, I've got a problem. The control handles for a large part of this transform are sitting somewhere out here, and I don't have access to them, and it is because I'm not on the pasteboard. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the return key to submit the transform, Command Z to undo it, and then hit the F key to get to the pasteboard. And now when I do that transform, it will actually, I will be able to get to all the control handles the whole time. So again, with shadow number 1 selected, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, drag the anchor point down to right between her toes, click and drag this down, and what I'm looking to do is sort of get part of this one sort of hip lined up with sort of where her legs are on the other part. That's kind of what I'm doing. However, now this transform, the shadow that's actually kicking off her feet, would be completely different shape. So we really need to distort this guy. To do that, the first thing I'm going to do is actually crush the girl. So I'm going to collapse this shadow in on itself. It's actually, I'm going to come down and really squeeze it down like this so that it actually seems a little bit more like that. I've lost it now. It's no longer in register with the bottom of her feet. So I'm simply going to put my cursor in the middle of that to get it back up to her feet again. And you can continue to play with this stuff forever. I'm going to put in a little bit more rotation like this. And I'm feeling like things are slightly better in this regard a little bit. We've still got to do some work on these guys, but this will sort of get me close enough. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK to submit that transform. Yeah.
So, do you have a reason for using scale and rotate instead of distort?
Oh, no, I use everything. I use distort, perspective, anything that you can get to work. Anything. And did distort work better for you?
Oh, so much faster.
Oh, so wait, show me.
And it's like already almost exact.
God. So wait, you reset the did you reset the anchor point down first?
Yeah. So
Okay, so you reset the anchor point down, and then it's just distort. Okay. Here we go. Back in history. Hey, come on. I got to tell you this, guys, right now. Fucking shadows. I hate shadows. It's the most difficult thing I think there is to do it. So anyway, this is thanks to Tari. Everybody owes him a beer tonight. Okay, Command T. We're going to start over again. Drag the anchor point down to between her toes again. And in this case, Ari does a drop-down menu. I'm still going to keep you guys old school and actually come to the transform dialog box down to distort. I know. And click on the top center part right down here and then just drag this part down so that it lines up more on her legs like that, which actually works out really well. Not pretty well, it works out really well. So that part's good, okay? I'm also going to change the bottom of her feet just a little bit so it lines up. So this is sort of what mine is beginning to look like. Okay, go ahead and hit the return key to actually submit that guy. So now we need to clean this guy up. So the first thing we're going to do to clean this guy up is we need to keep the part of this shadow that's on the back wall, we need to remove that. To get rid of that, again, I've made you another, there's a, we're going to do the exact same thing again. We are going to command click on the back wall to load that as a selection. We're going to come over to Shadow 1 and we're going to click on Add Layer Mask. And again, what that does is it actually leaves it removes the shadow from the floor and puts it on the back wall. But then you simply invert the mask, Command I. And so now we've actually got the two where they're sort of beginning to line up, where things are beginning, my image is beginning to sort of begin to work out. And again, I am building a compound shadow now. The shadow that's on the floor is different than the shadow that's actually on the wall. However, there's some more work that we need to do on this guy because it's clearly not correct yet. The first thing we need to do, and yours is going to be slightly different depending on your distortion, so you guys are going to have to just watch what I do on mine to see how I clean mine up, and then you guys can actually do the same thing for yours. So the first thing I'm going to do is zoom in and look on this, and because I've got the shadow of her hand right here, I cannot have her hand right here, so I'm simply going to get rid of it by using the mask that I've already got. This mask right here, I can use to get rid of that hand. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, make sure it is a normal brush, 100% opacity, 100% flow, making sure it is a completely hard brush. And on my mask for this shadow number 1 right here, I'm simply going to use black to remove that hand that's right there. Now, there's a couple of other things that I've actually got going on right here as well. One of them is I'm seeing the bottom of the skirt. Now, I think it probably would be easier for me to go ahead and distort this a little bit more than to try to get in and paint all of this out, which is what I'm going to do. However, you need to click on the chain link between the mask and the pixel layer so that when I distort the pixel layer, it won't change the mask at all. So with the chain link unchecked between these two, on the pixel layer, again, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to zoom out to see where things are. I'm going to put the anchor point, again, down by her feet. Come up to the image menu, down to transform, down to distort again, and simply click and drag that part out so that I don't have to go in and do all that masking. I'm going to then zoom in and take a look at it, and all of this part actually seems to be working reasonably well for me, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the return key to actually do that. Now I've actually got a couple of other options, a couple of other things that I need to deal with, and that's the fact that these shadows do not match up, and I need them to match up. So for me, at this stage of the game, I'm going to merge these two shadows into one layer so that I can actually work on them separate. So to do that, you turn everything else off except for your shadows. So I turn the body off, and I turn the background off. So the only thing that I have on are these two shadows. That's the only thing that is on right now. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then I'm going to, again, Elizabeth, I don't know how you're going to, well, see if this one happens for you here. I'm going to pick the top shadow to make sure it is the active layer for me. And again, I'm going to hold down Command, Option, Shift, and hit the letter E to get a merge stamp version of those two. It worked that time? Oh, good. Okay, then I'm going to turn off shadows 1 and 2 because otherwise you've got two sets of these. And I'm going to rename that top guy Shadow 3. And you can turn the body back on, and you can turn the background back on as well. So in Shadow 3, I'm going to zoom into this guy. The first thing that you'll notice in Shadow 3 is that there's a line that separates them right here where these two things go together. The reason that line exists is that because when I made the selection for the background, I used a path to do it. This is the width of the path. So the first thing I need to do is to fix this guy. In order to fix that guy, again, I'm up here on shadow number 3. It is the active layer. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make it a small brush. Make sure that the blending mode is set to normal. 100% opacity, 100% flow. Make sure that it is a completely hard brush. And go to your tablet to actually do this and simply paint that line in. That's the easiest way to get rid of it. Now, to get rid of the other parts, or to actually take care of the other parts, starts to get to be a little bit trickier. So I'll show you how I would actually deal with it. I am going to put a layer mask on this guy to control that, because if something goes wrong, I want to be able to change it. I don't want to start erasing pixels here. I don't want to start painting over stuff. I knew that the line in between had to be there, but the rest of it I wasn't really sure about. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually take the pen tool, P key, and I'm going to start on this part of her body right here, this part of the shadow right here. Let me move over here just a little bit to see this. And I'm going to click on this line of her body right here and come down and click right here on the ground where the bottom of that wall meets. And then I'm actually going to then simply come out here. Sorry. I'll come out here and click and drag out to sort of put in a little bit of curve in that body. I'm also then going to curve around to add a little bit more back into here like this. That's sort of just my change right here. And then I'm going to come back around to the top. Oops, sorry. To the top. I'm going to load this as a selection. So go into Path, Command click to load that as a selection. Back to my Layers palette. And in this layer mask, I'm going to fill that with black so that I hide it. Command D to deselect. Now on this other side over here, I need to get rid of this part here as well. So to be honest with you, I can hit that with just a brush. It's so small, I'm just going to tap that. However, I feel like that this leg is too narrow in here. I feel like this leg actually needs to bow, this shadow needs to bow out a little bit more right here. So again, I'm going to do that with the pen tool. Working on my pixel layer now, hit the P key. I'm going to start up here like this, and I'm going to come down and actually going to put that curve in like that right there. And then I'm going to continue to curve around like this and sort of draw in what I think would actually be more what that leg would look like. And then come back around again to complete my selection. In this case, I'm going to go back into Path. I'm going to save this path as right leg. So I'm going to click on my drop-down menu, Save Path, or we'll call it right knee, because that's what I think it is. R-I-G-H-T, right knee, and say OK. I'm going to load this as a selection by command clicking it. I am going to slightly feather this guy. So again, up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Feather, and I'm going to put like a ½ a pixel feather on this. It's not much, but it shouldn't be completely hard. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. Back into my Layers palette, working on the pixel layer here, I'm going to simply fill this with black. Command D to deselect. I feel like there's a little, I don't know, there's something right there that's not quite right. So again, I'm going to try to clean this up using the Path tool, the pen tool. So I'm going to click and drag this out to sort of get a little bit of a curve there, come back around. In my Path, load this as a selection, go back into Layers. In my shadow mask now, I'm going to remove that little part by filling it with black. Command D to deselect. I'm going to double click on the hand to come back out, and this actually, that leg is beginning to feel more legitimate for me. I need to deal with the other leg in the same way. In the other leg, again, I need to drop off this big chunk of black that's right here. So again, I'm going to do the same thing, working in my layer mask with the pen tool, the P key. I'm going to start up on her leg here at the top on the back wall, come down to that juncture down there, and then again, I'm going to come out to this part right here, but I'm going to put a curve in there. I'm not just going to straight line this thing, because her legs, look at all the curves that are in his legs. There are very few straight lines in there. So again, I'm coming back up to the top and say OK to that to complete it. Into my Path, command click to load that as a selection. Back into my Layers palette. On the layer mask, because I need to hide this part of that shadow, on the layer mask with that as an active selection, fill that with black. Command D to deselect. I've got a little weirdness that's happening right there at the edge of that. I don't really like what's happening there on that part. Again, I can probably hit that with the B key just to knock the brush, just to knock that part off. And you know what's going to end up happening. I'm going to use this stupid brush like a million times on that and not just accept the fact that I should be doing it with the pen tool. And then finally, I need to do the very same thing that I did here. I need to have more of a curve that's coming off of this part to actually build a little bit more bulk up here at the top of her, at the top of this leg up here. So the P key is where I'm going to start. I'm actually going to start at the junction here right now. I'm not going to round that guy off. And I'm going to come down here and, again, put a little bit more curve in that to actually bring that part around. Back up here again to complete that path. I'm going to then save that path and call it left knee. And say OK. Command click to load that as a selection. Up to the select menu, down to modify, feather it about 1/2 pixel and say OK. Back into my layers palette. On the pixel layer of my shadow, not the mask, but on the pixel layer, I'm going to fill that with black. Command D to deselect. Double click on the hand and see how things are beginning to look. And I actually think things are beginning to look somewhat right. Shadows are a little bit weird and distorted like that. If you feel like that you need this guy, that this leg right in here is still too thin, compared to the other one, there's no reason that we can't continue this whole process. So I'll try it. Again, I've just hit the shadow layer for that, hit the P key, and click on this part probably up in here, and come down to put a little bit more bulk in this part right here. And then again, up, complete my mask. I'm going to save this one and call this one left knee 2. And click to load this. I wouldn't be doing any of this if we hadn't distorted that. You know this already, right? No, I'm just kidding. Working again on the shadow layer itself, whatever. Again, fill this part with black. Command D to deselect. That part feels right here. And then I feel like, to be honest with you guys, that this is sort of beginning to work. You sort of see where this part's actually going. Because again, the shadow on her legs would actually be narrower because we are we're seeing the side light part of this, not the front light part of this. So I need to check the area that's around her feet. So the area that's around her feet, as I zoom in, well, the first thing that I spot around her feet is that there is color spill in that image that I would like to get rid of. To go ahead and get rid of it, I'm going to select my body image that is at the very top. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to change the blending mode of that brush to color. I'm going to sample her shoe and make sure that this is a hard brush. And in this case, guys, this is something you need to actually know about this, is that as you start to paint with this, you'll actually come out into your image, which you don't want to do. So I'm going to Command Z to undo that. But in this layer right here, there's this girl. She is on a transparent layer. You can lock the transparency of the layer. All I want to do is paint on this little green spill. That's what I'm trying to get rid of. But I'm painting out into the transparency part of this. If you click on this lock transparency right here, you'll see that you get a little lock there right now. And now when you use a brush on this layer and you come out into this area right in here, you don't paint on anything because the transparency has been locked. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Command Z to undo that, and then simply use this brush to get rid of the green spill. It also looks like it probably should have been choked, but I digress. Okay, so finally, to clean up the shadow part right here, there's a part of the shadow that's right here in the front of her shoe that would never be there. So again, I'm simply going back to my shadow mask that's right here with, again, a normal brush, normal blending mode, whatever. I am going to go to a soft brush right now because the edge under here would not be hard. It would actually be a little bit soft. And again, with black as my foreground color on my layer mask, I'm simply going to get rid of that part right there. I feel like that line is too soft now. That was a mistake. Command Z to undo that. And I am going to make this a much harder line. Not completely hard, but up around the 70%. And do the same thing again. And that ends up being a much better line on that part right there. I've got a couple of other holes that I don't like about that are in the shadow right here. There's one right here that I can see. So I'm simply going to plug that in. Sorry, I'm still on my layer mask. That's the part that I want right there. And then, you know, I feel like we're off to the races. You could continue to do other things to this. If you felt like this leg overall was too thin, you can actually select just this leg. So I'm on the layer mask. I'm on the pixel layer itself for this shadow number 3. Hit the L key to bring up the lasso tool and simply select this area, this leg right here. Command T to transform that, and that will only transform this area that's been selected. So you can actually push this part out. I'm going to hit Command Z to do it. I'm going to hold down the Option key and do it so that they both push out. The problem that you run into doing this is that I can't see what I'm really doing up here. If you hit Command H, you will be able to hide it. Then you end up with registration issues here, whatever. There's a world of hurt that can actually get involved in doing this. So I'm just going to accept the fact that I don't want to do that and Command Z to get it back. And we're almost home. All right, so this is my shadow that I've actually got coming off of here. How are you guys doing?
I got stuff at the knees.
What happened?
Oh, wait, how much did you feather it?
A half a pixel. That's a 5 pixel. Yep, okay. That's it. And so then you're on this guy, and so you want to fill that with black. Good. Okay. So you're good to go.
And I just have to do...
Yeah, but don't worry about it. You'll get the whole idea, because again, you're not turning this one in. Okay, so... Yeah.
Okay, so when I was taking out some of the shadow,
Yeah.
I could see all the white parts. I don't know if I just did it wrong. Right here and right here.
All right. Let's try turn shadow 3 off. Let me just see what happens. Turn it back on. So that's actually white. You're not getting, that's the problem is that I'm using a mask to hide this.
Oh.
You're painting with white on that layer. So this, if you hold down the Option key and click on this, click on the eyeball.
Oh.
You'll see you've painted white in here.
Okay.
That's your problem.
Okay.
So again, using a mask would have gotten rid of that. But don't worry about it. You're close enough. Because we've got a lot of other things I want to get to tonight. But I don't want you to leave you behind. So Kim, you're good on this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So finally, guys, this part's all looking sort of well. However, the shadow itself is actually too sharp. So once you get this whole part done like this, this is the only other time I'm going to allow you to apply a layer mask, because we need to turn this thing into a smart object to actually do some work on it. So with the shadow shaped correctly, the way you want it to be, remove your layer mask. Simply click on your layer mask, drag it down to the garbage, and when this dialog box opens up, you want to apply the layer mask. And what that will do is it will get rid of those pixels that we were using that mask to actually hide. So those things are gone now. So we need to then turn shadow 3 into a smart object. So up to the select menu, I'm sorry, the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to convert to smart object. This is now a smart object. And the reason I want to convert this to a smart object is I want to actually blur this guy. So I'm going to move in on this. So again, this is another thing about how shadows work. If you take your little, everybody stand up and come over here close enough. You might be able to see, I'm going to try a different figure, something that will actually stand up. So come take a quick peek at this, guys, and look and see what happens here when you look at this shadow. Can you guys see this? So what happens with the shadow is it starts to move away from the figure. It what? It gets blurry here. As it starts to move away, the shadow gets softer, right? You guys too. As it starts to move away, the shadow gets softer, right? We need to do that for this shadow. So to do that, you want to make this thing a smart object. That's really critical in doing this. So this thing is a smart object now. I'm going to make a smart, I'm going to run Gaussian blur. I'm not Gaussian, I am going to run a blur on it. But instead of using Gaussian blur, I'm actually going to use a motion blur on it. And the reason I use a motion blur is I feel like it gives a better, oh, I've still got a selection going, hang on. See, the only thing that blurred was this one leg, because I've got a hidden selection going. So I'm going to cancel out of that, hit Command H to show my marching ants again, and then Command D to deselect it. And then I'm going to run blur on this guy. So again, up to filter, down to blur, motion blur. And what I like about motion blur is that I'll show you an extreme version of it. I'm going to crank it up quite a bit so that the distance is up quite a bit. You can see, though, that there's a little clock face on this guy that allows you to control the angle of the blur. So, for instance, if you have the blur going from, say, like 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock across there, the blur moves in that same axis on your shadow. If you move it in the opposite direction, if you say you move it from like 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, then the blur is actually running across this way. It's running again. It runs in the direction of this line. That's what actually happens. So in my case, I found that usually the best success is to run it across sideways like this, and then distance controls how strong the blur is. So in my case, I'm not going to drag it across really, really hard, because the shadow on the back wall, again, if you look at this shadow back over here, on this wall back here, it's relatively sharp. So this is a pretty subtle move. So I'm going to crank this guy down to just soften it up a little bit. Again, use your preview button on and off to actually see just how much that you're actually putting in there. In my case, I've got about, I'm going to drop it down probably to about 10 pixels, I think, and I've got an angle of 27. But again, your shadows are slightly different than mine anyway, so this part won't really actually apply to you guys. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. And then finally, because this is a smart object, I've got a smart filter, and it's this guy right here. So I can use this filter to control where that blur happens. Remember, it's much sharper at her feet and much more faded as we get to the back. I mean, it's more blurred in the background, sharper at her feet. So what I need to do is I need to use this mask to remove the motion blur up here near her feet and still leave it on this part back here. So to do that, I do a gradient. So I'm going to pick the gradient tool. However, we need to reset this gradient so that the gradient actually will go from black to white. So again, because my foreground and background colors are black and white, clicking on this drop-down menu, I can either come back to foreground, background, or I could pick the black and white one, which is it's a permanent black and white one. You just don't want to be using that foreground to transparent that we were doing to build shadows in the beginning. So again, I'm picking the foreground to background one here. And then again, you also don't want this to be a radial gradient. You want this to be a linear gradient, which is this guy right here. And so once I get all of that done, this guy is set up, I come back over and I click on my Smart Filter mask. If white is my foreground color, what that means is that wherever I start this gradient will be white, and then where I stop it will be black. And that's what I want. I'm going to start at her legs, and I'm going to drag in this direction and let go. And you can see that her legs, this part of the shadow is now very sharp. And as we start to move back, it actually gets softer and softer and softer. In my opinion, that isn't quite right. So the thing about gradients is you can pull them over and over and over again. They rewrite the entirety of what is on there. So there's a gradient on here right now. I'm going to click and drag again to do it again in a different fashion to pull it a little bit further, and it rewrites the gradient completely. I'm actually going to click and drag past her feet a little bit, and that part actually begins to work for me. I think that the line going back is correct. However, I feel like the shadow on the back wall is a little too soft now. I feel like it would be a little bit sharper. The beautiful thing about having this as a smart object and a smart filter is I can simply double click on my motion blur to open it back up, and I'm going to drop the distance down to 7 pixels and say okay. So you can continue to tweak this as much as you want, and that actually feels a little bit better to me. Sharper at her feet, fading back, softer at the back of her body. So if I turn off the smart filter, this is what it actually did. That's the shift that it made in it, and it makes my shadow far more believable. Okay, we're almost home, guys. To finish this out, what I need to do is I need a version of this smart object with the smart filter. I need a version of all of this by itself. So again, I'm turning off everything in my image except for that shadow number 3. I'm turning off all the backgrounds. I'm turning off shadow 1 and 2 never were on. The only thing that I have got on right now is this shadow number 3 with this smart filter on it. Again, with the filter select, with the layer selected, Command Option Shift and hit the letter E, and it makes a merge stamped rasterized version of that smart object. Does that make sense what I've got going here? Are we good on this? Yep, I'll just do it again. So what I need to do is this. What I'm really trying to do is build a mask that's got this feathered blur in it. That's what I'm trying to do, right? So I've got this smart object that's actually got this on it. My problem is that this gets to be, well, actually, I'll take it back. Let me see if I load this really quick, what ends up happening. This might be an easier way of doing it. Hang on one second. No, I don't think it works. Okay. So what I need is I need a version of this smart object that is actually sharp down here by her feet and softer and motion blurred here in the background, right? So in order to do that, I'm turning everything else off, and then I'm just doing a merge stamp version. Well, again, there's nothing to really merge, but it will stamp another copy of this guy. So Command Option Shift and hit the letter E. And now what I've got, if I turn this off, is you can actually see, son of a bitch, that didn't do it either. All right. Let's try another way of going about doing this. I'm going to make a copy of my layer of my smart object. So I'm simply going to drag the smart, I've turned everybody else off. I'm dragging the smart object down. I'm going to make a copy of this guy. And I'm going to rasterize that copy. So up to layer, down to smart object, down to rasterize. And that version did work. Okay, so that's the way I've actually got to do it. So what I've now done is I copied that smart object because I want to keep this smart object. I don't, again, if my shadow ends up being wrong and I want to go back and revisit this, I still need that smart object, right? So I don't want to commit to it. So I make a copy of it, keeping this as a virgin down here. It's still there, but I copied it. And so here, I'll do it one more time. And for that matter, you can have everything turned back. Everything can be turned on except for the shadow layers to build. So you can turn the backgrounds back on because this method doesn't matter that you've got the body on or anything else on. So what I've got on now, this is where we are. The only thing that I've got on is the body. I've got the smart object shadow on. The other two things that built the shadow are turned off. Those are not on. So this is my only shadow right here. I'm going to copy that smart object by simply dragging it down to make a copy of it. And then I'm going to rasterize this copy, which will apply this smart filter to this. It'll actually do it all into one. So again, up to the layer menu, down to smart object, down to rasterize. This has now been made just a solid a layer that's got sharper down here at the bottom, blurrier at the top. I'm going to turn off my smart object because I don't want that guy on. So is everybody this far with me? Are we good? All right, so this is how you finally gild the lily here, guys. This is the ultimate. People, this is how you get your jobs and keep them. I'm going to load this thing now as a selection. Command-click to load it as a selection. And then I'm going to add a curve, an adjustment layer curve on top of this. it builds that mask onto this curve, which was what all of this process was about. The original 2 shadow layers, the masking, the turning it into merging, the pen work tool, the smart object, turning it into a smart object, the blur motion filter was all designed to just build this curve mask. That's all we were ever designing all of these steps to do. And this is why. If you turn off the shadow that actually made this thing, you'll see that you actually have nothing there. But if you come up here and you click on the very top in your properties palette, if you click on the very top and you drag this thing down, you build a shadow. And you build a real shadow the way a real shadow is built. To use black and reduce the opacity is not how a shadow really works. That is just a dark or a light gray that you're throwing on it. What we need to do is remove light from this background, which is what happens with a curve. But it gets better. So with this curve built, I want you, or just enough where you can see where it is, I want you to come over to the eyedropper, come down to the color sampler tool, and I want you, in my case, there's already a color sampler that's close to this number 1. We'll just clear all the samples. Just come up to the option menu at the very top and hit clear all. And what I want you to do then is put 1 color sampler right in the middle of this shadow right here. And then I want you to come over and put another color sampler in the middle of this shadow of the real one that's on the background over here. You've now got 2 color readouts. And again, now we can use this curve to do exactly what we always use curves do. We can use it to actually match the lighting of these 2. So you can see right now my point number 1 right here, the real shadow right here, because I pulled this down so far, is reading 120, 120, 120. My curve is much closer up to the real shadow is more in the 160s. So I'm going to drag this line back up till I get a 160 readout in my red channel. Again, your numbers should be very close to this. They may not be exact, but they should be close. So right now, I've got a red at a 160. However, I've got a 161 in green and a 161 in the blue, and they should be 155 and 152 respectively. So, because again, shadows have color. In my case right now, this is a perfectly neutral gray shadow, which is usually not correct. So again, up to the RGB channel, come down to the green channel, grab that top slider again and start to pull it down till I read 155, and then go into my blue channel and click and drag that guy down till I get a 152. Double click on the hand to kick back out. Say what?
My red won't go any higher.
It's because your whole RGB guy is down too low. So go back to the full composite. You can do these individually. You can take that guy all the way up and do it on a channel by channel basis.
Okay.
But guys, you know this is fake. I'm telling you right now, I could print this thing out and show this to anybody on the street and they would go, wow, I've had agents say, where the fuck did you guys fly to get those pictures? Are we good on this? Look at your work. I want everybody to sit back, everybody who finally got to the final end of this all, to sit back and look at your work and tell me what you think. This is fucking amazing. It is fucking amazing. This is a girl shot on green screen, put in a foam core model. Boom. I'm serious. Everybody look at your screen. And if you didn't do the assignment, then look at the screen of your neighbor who did. Or look up at this one right here. Insane. Complex shadows. Elizabeth.
It still looks weird. I don't know what's wrong with it. It's like a rainbow.
Jesus, girl. Let's do this. Let me just see your properties really quick. Let's just see what. Go back to your RGB guy in its entirety. Actually, just do this on the custom up here. Go to default. It'll just take it back to a normal curve. Then grab the main guy right here. Drag down till you'll get a 160 or a 150. No, oh, that's the problem right here. You're looking to match point 2 to
Yeah,
3.
That's what I was doing.
Okay, no, that's fine. So 2 is reading a 157. So just drag that guy down until you get a red 157. Yeah, close enough. And then go to the green channel and drag the very top down till you get till, and it'll go quick. You're too far because you're going for a 151. Yeah, and then do your blue and you're looking for a 147. And it'll go really quick too. Yeah, and you're good. All right, guys, you should all be thrilled. So what have we done today? Amazing knockout work, built 2 series of shadows, believable. I'm telling you this right now, this puts you guys such a rare league. There are so few people who can do this and do this well and understand this. Okay. So, okay, Verser, show me something that will impress me, that I can make money with. This will actually allow you to make quite a bit of money because this is, again, I don't want to like oversell this, but I'm telling you this right now, guys. This is the real deal. Okay. You can close this guy up. It's not part of your homework. You don't need to save it. Again, if you're on the pasteboard like I am, you hit the F key twice to get back to the little stoplight so that you can get rid of this guy and go ahead and close this up, and you don't need to save that. We are then going to come into, let's start with the black shirt. So in your same folder, there should be a thing called Shirt Dark version 2. If you can open that guy up for me. So, recoloring fabric. Can you make this a white shirt? How? Try.
Give me 48 minutes and I'll say yes.
How would you make this a white shirt? Invert it. All right, let's see how we do with an invert on that, right? God, if this works, I'm going to be pissed. That is a negative of it. That is not a white shirt.
What color would you say it is then?
That doesn't look like a negative to you?
But it's still to us.
No, there are no shadows.
Bingo, thank you. The shadows are reversed.
Shadows are brighter than the shirt.
It's a negative. That's not a white shirt. Okay, other options. All right, this comes from, you guys should be happy that I've been around as long as I have because I actually go back to earlier versions of Photoshop. There was a guy who wrote a book for Photoshop 6, not CS6, but version 6, which was like in 1989, right? And he never wrote another book, and it was called the Photoshop Cookbook. He's the guy, the pen tool, the way I use pen tool came right out of that book. This is a recipe that comes out of this book. All I can tell you is I've given you the recipes for this. You have to follow the recipe. That's all I can say to you, okay? So the recipes are on the Moodle site. There's a PDF on there for actually recoloring black shirts because we're not just going to turn this thing white. We're actually going to recolor them. And we're going to do the same thing with white shirts. But because this becomes the way that now most people are actually doing this kind of work is they take a single shirt. I mean, you guys have all seen it. You take a single shirt and then there's 1,000 colors of it, right? You really think they're photographing that 1,000 colors? There is no way they are doing that. They figure out one way to actually go in and recolor really, really, really fast. So that's what I'm going to show you guys how to do it. But this is the most extreme, one of the most, well, again, both of them are pretty extreme because to get this thing to white and actually get it to be believable white shirt, whatever, is extremely difficult to do. However, the first thing that we've got here is a problem, and the first problem that we've got here is that this is an RGB image. So everybody in this room, who in this room remembers what LAB is when we had the whole conversation about color? What is an LAB space? What makes it different than an RGB space? You're close, Joe. Keep going. Yeah, something bright, whatever. Okay, fuck. Okay. Really quickly, let me show you. I know you guys thought when I was doing all that color lecture shit, this could not possibly be more boring and there's no reason I need to listen to this. Well, it's going to come back and haunt you right now. But don't worry, I will get you through this. Oh, and I come to the slide. How good was that? So what happens in an LAB color space is that color is separated from brightness. So again, this is our hue saturation brightness model. It's the same thing. However, here we have, instead of hue and saturation, we actually still have color axis like you do in an RGB model. But like an HSB model, you have separated brightness from color. So you can change color without changing the brightness. Can you do that in RGB? Not without using blending modes. And blending modes are an imitation of LAB. And that's why we have a problem doing color work. Serious color work is not done in RGB. Serious color work is done in LAB because you can change color without changing the brightness of your image, and it's incredibly important. So that's what we're going to do here, the method that we're going to go here for changing this guy.
Is there a reason why LEDs are not typical thing to use?
Actually, interesting that you would say that. Oh, why do I always go to something wrong? I'm bringing a raw file into Camera Raw. See this right here? This is LAB.
Oh, yeah.
This is the B channel, blue to yellow. This is the A channel, green to magenta. If I shift these guys, I didn't make that image brighter or darker. That's exposure. This is separating brightness from color. So you can do really wild color swings in this without changing the brightness of your image at all. It is underpinning. LAB is the underpinning of all Photoshop. RGB is an illusion they give us to work on monitors. No, because monitors aren't that way. But the truth be told, this is not a perfect LAB model. What really happens here, if we go back, I'm going to cancel out of this really quick. Just remember this. Let me look at my keynote again. Just so you guys know, I don't want you to think that I'm lying to you or that I don't know what I'm doing or whatever. I just want you to know that the difference here. In this, what happens is in Photoshop, so you sort of see the orientation. You're going to hear this. You're not going to see this. You see this orientation of the red-green axis and then the blue-yellow axis here. And in this LAB model, this is one thing. In the Photoshop model, they rotate all of this just slightly in this direction. It still forms a perfect square, but this B is not the exact same B as the B is in Camera Raw. And this yellow isn't, but it's rotated around the same space. So you describe the exact same space, but the numbers are not identical. That's all I'm saying, right? Again, this is about as esoteric as you can get, but let's get back to this and do the fun part here. So, okay, so we're going to change this guy. Let me hide everybody else. Okay, so the first step that you're going to do in this, and guys, I always go back and I just read this stuff out loud. Your first step is to convert this to LAB. To do this, again, what I would do first off is I would do this, but then I would save it as a copy. I would never not have the original, which is what this is. But nonetheless, in our case, we'll be okay. Up to image, down to mode, down to LAB color. So take a look at my screen and see where I'm at. Image down to mode to LAB color. And it changes it to, it's now in LAB. You can tell it's in LAB. By the way, it's not lab. If you say lab, people will laugh at you and they'll think you're an idiot and they won't hire you. They'll never ask you back, or they'll offer to pay you $9 an hour instead of the $2,000 a day that you deserve. So don't call it lab, call it LAB. It's no more lab than RGB is a good. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is come over to your layers palette and add a group on top of this. So simply click and add a new group on the top of this. And I want you to click on that group name and rename it New Color. And hang on one second. Okay, I got that. I got. Okay, so I have created, if you come over here and look in your channels palette, you'll actually see that in the very top, we do have, again, at the very top, the combined part is the LEB channel. Again, it's an illusion. You have the lightness channel, then you've actually got the A channel, which again, this is the color that describes magenta to green axis, and the B, which is blue to yellow axis. And then down here, I've actually created a couple of selections for you, pre-selections for you. So the first one, I want you to just load the one that's called shirt. Command click to load shirt as a selection, and come over to your new color group, and I want you to put this mask on your new color group itself. There's nothing in your group yet, but I want you to mask this guy. So with new color group selected, simply click on add layer mask, and that will do what that needed to do. Then we need to make a copy of this background layer. So I want you to go ahead and do a copy of the background layer. So simply drag the background down to make a copy of it, and then drag this on top of the group. And you will see that it is now inside the group because it's actually been pushed over slightly to the right. Is everybody good on this? Okay. Our first trick in this is that then we need to, and so few people do this, but this is a really important one. You need to then, if you're going to get into doing any sort of recoloring, the best thing you can do to recolor is to destroy the color that exists in an image to begin with. So if we start with no color, recoloring is actually much easier. If you start with a color, then you're trying to adjust that, and it's just much more difficult. So we need to strip all the color out of this. To do that, you come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to desaturate. We are going to completely desaturate it. You don't see a real shift because essentially it was a black shirt to begin with, but at any rate, so that's what we want to actually do here. And then you want to double click on this background copy and rename it DSAT1 and say okay to that. You want to create 2 more copies of this DSAT1. So simply drag it again down, and instead of calling it DSAT1 copy, simply double click on the name and call it DSAT2. And then finally make a copy of that guy and call it DSAT3. Okay. I want you to turn off the eyeball on 2 and 3, and I want you to make DSAT1 active. So I've just turned off the eyeballs on 2 and 3 and selected DSAT1, and then we're going to come down and add an adjustment layer above this guy. So click down here, and the adjustment layer you're going to add on top of this is solid color. And this guy will open up. And the solid color I want you to add on this is going to be a 245, 245, 245. So in the red channel, even though this is an LEB image, you can do any values. You can do hue saturation values, RGB values, LEB values. You can even do CMYK values. In our case, it's just easier to do it in RGB values. So 245, tab key, 245, tab key, 245. And go ahead and say okay to that. Then we need to change the blending mode of this layer, this solid color adjustment layer, to hard light. So again, drop down on the blending mode down to hard light. And at this stage of the game, we've actually gotten the shirt to actually be white. However, we've lost all the contrast in this guy completely. So to fix that, I want you to turn on the eyeball for DSAT2 and select it, make it active and turn it on. And I want you to change its blending mode from normal to overlay. And all of a sudden we've started to pick up some contrast in our shirt. I want you to then come up to DSAT 3, make it active, also turn it on, and change its blending mode to overlay as well. And you have a white shirt.
That's magical.
Oh, it's insane. It gets better. So if you feel like, okay, well, you know, I could, and the advantage to this, again, I've got no contamination in the shadows because all of the work that I'm doing in here, we are in LAB, and so I'm not running into any problems. I'm not struggling with any of those issues here at all. You could still do other contrast moves on this guy if you felt like you needed to, whatever, but for the most part, this actually, it simply looks like a white shirt, which is exactly what I was looking to do. If you felt like it was still slightly too gray, it's possible. Go back into your solid color. You can double click on this guy as well, and we can try to bump these to 250. I don't know if it will work, but it might if we put it to 250. It seems like a lighter shirt, and I'll give you that. But again, I'm losing contrast. So to build more contrast back into it, you would simply copy DSAT 3 again. The DSAT 2 and 3 are contrast moves. That's all we're doing. The color change is happening here in the solid color. So you could grab DSAT 3 and copy it again, and you'll see it builds more contrast into the shirt. If you feel like that's too strong, but with it off is too weak, you can actually simply use the opacity slider to drive it down, and you can pick any sort of amount that you want in between. But that's, okay, the first time you do this for somebody, they're just like, you're what? Okay, let's go on. I want you to collapse new color. So collapse the group and rename that new color and call it white. And say, okay. We're then going to duplicate the white shirt. We're duplicating the entire group. And in our new group, we are going to talk about how people actually do specify color. So color that is specified for anything. If you're a retoucher and somebody says, I need this shirt to be a certain color, they will give it to you in an LAB value. That's how you get it. To see what those are and how that works, I want you to actually go ahead and open up the group right here so that it actually is open for us. I want you to come over to your foreground color picker and open up the color picker chart. And you'll see that when this guy opens up that we've got our HSB. It's the thing that we've always dealt with here, right? But if you click on color libraries, you will actually open up in a series of process colors. Pantone is the standard that everybody in the United States, for the most part, uses to describe color. So when you actually get, when an art director says to you, this shirt is supposed to be a Pantone uncoated 196, whatever, you have to go in here and find it to see what the color is. So we're just going to scroll down in here and pick, in this Pantone, everybody needs to know this. I need you to look at this screen right now. This is important. There's a whole collection of Pantone colors, and you will be told which one these are. So if somebody gives you a Pantone like 7547, it matters whether it's coated or uncoated, or all of these things matter in here. So they will give you, for instance, the number you see underneath my screen right here is a Pantone 7547C that stands for a 7447 coated stock. That is a different color than a 7547 uncoated stock. So don't fuck that up or you will get the wrong color. But usually the colors that you will get for process, which is would be for catalog, print, magazine, books, that kind of stuff, usually is this solid coated stock. So if we select on the solid coated stock, we can pick a shirt, and let's pick, I'm going to pick this pink, pick any shirt you want. I'm going to pick this pink one that is a 183C. And you'll see this 183, it's like a rose-colored shirt. That's the color shirt that I'm actually going to make right now. What you'll notice is that the only readouts that you get when you select that 183C is an LAB set of numbers. And so the LAB numbers for my 183C, my rose shirt, is an L of 73, B of 43, an A of 43, and a B of 6. That's the color that you're actually going to get. So back here in our second group, so you can go ahead and cancel out of this. You can go ahead and say okay to this. It'll load this. Yeah, it won't matter here as your foreground color. That part doesn't really matter to me right here. What matters is that in my second group here, white copy, I'm going to change this to 183C rose. I'm just adding the rose color. So to do that, you are now going to double click on your color picker right here, and in your to the solid color that's inside that group that was now, again, we had a 250, 250, 250. We need that to now put in these values that we just had. So it is a 73 for the lightness. Hit the tab key for the A value, it is a 43. And then finally hit the tab key for a B value, it is a 6. That is now the beginning of our rose color, and we're going to go ahead and say okay to that. However, I have got this way too contrasty right now, so I'm going to pull some of that contrast off. And what am I doing wrong? Oh, wait. I've still got the group 1 on. The white shirt is still on. The white shirt group is still on. So turn the white shirt group off. Background still needs to stay on. I'm sorry, what were you just saying? Oh, all the desats off and it actually came back? Turn all the desats off and you come back. However, we're not complete yet on this. We're not finished yet on this. To actually make sure that you got the exact color, you need to drop, because you're close, you need to drop a color sampler point right here in the middle of this shirt. And then in the right above that solid color layer, I'm going to actually, I'm getting an LAB readout. You can see right here in my color guy right here. And I'm supposed to have a 73, and a 73, and I've got a 56. You need to fine tune this with a curve. So we're going to come up, we're going to put a curve on this guy. Again, I'm going to use the targeting adjustment tool in my lightness channel. I'm going to click on this, and I'm simply watching the readout right here. And that 56 needs to be a 73. That's the color that they asked me to make it. So again, I pop that up to a 73. In my B channel, again, using the color picker on that very same point, I clicked that 42 is supposed to be a 43. It was close. And then finally in my, I'm sorry, that was the A channel. In my B channel, the final one here, I'm going to click and pop that guy up 1 to get to a 6. Down to get a 7. This is now my 186 rose shirt. If you feel like you do need extra contrast on this, that this is a little bit too pale, you can actually turn on one of your desat layers, make it active, and really crank its opacity down so that it's not anywhere near that intense. You probably will have to go in and change your LEB values again, because you can see it dropped my, my L value is actually down. The other two are actually still fine. So I could go back into my curve and simply in my lightness layer, again, boost that up till I got back up to 73 again. And this is how you recolor the white shirt. I know, this is insane, right? So that's your rose, and it just keeps going on and on and on. Cool, right? Okay, really quickly, you can close that guy up. We don't need him anymore. You should try this. It's not an assignment, but you should try this when you get home sometime during the week in your spare time, 4 weeks away from the end of school. Typically, if I had more time, I would have you do this with both an LAB version of the file and an RGB version of the file, and you would see the difference. What ends up happening is that you end up getting this almost solarized look in the shadows. The shadows do not take on that shadow quality. They end up being, they like glow almost. They look solarized. It's the only thing I can really say. Some cases it's worse, some cases it's not as bad. Okay, so the last file that I want you to actually open up is the white shirt, or the light colored one. It's in the same group. Do version 2. Don't do the version 1. Version 2's got slightly better mask. Okay, so in version 1, we're going to actually recolor this guy. We're starting out with white, which presents a whole series of different problems. However, in this guy, I've actually got slightly another problem or another issue with this. You can see that in my case, I've actually got the buttons and the labels and the shirt themselves are not all together in one group like I had for you guys before. How do I make this into a single workable mask? How do I merge them?
Select them and go to the menu and say merge.
I had to select them and do what?
Go to the menu and say merge.
Oh, no, that doesn't happen in channels. So the way you do it is you come over to the buttons right here and you command click to load them. And you see they're circled, whatever. And then I'm going to come down to the shirt itself. Do I want those buttons to be white or black in my mask? Black, right? So can I just hit the D key to default my foreground and background colors to get to black and white? And because black is my background color, hit Command Delete to actually make the buttons black. Command D to deselect. How do I do the same thing for the labels? Do the same thing. Okay. Command click to load the labels as a selection. Come back down, make sure shirt is active. And again, hold down because black is my background color. Command Delete. And now I've got that. Command D to deselect. Okay, so now I've actually built the final mask that I need to do this work. So again, back over in your layers palette, go ahead and make sure that you've got the RGB at the top. I'm still in RGB. Your first move is to the work we've done is fine. Getting the mask tweaked out is not going to change one iota for changing this to LAB. So up to the image menu, down to mode, down to LAB color. To change it, you'll notice that again up in the title here it is changed to LAB, which is exactly what we wanted. So for this guy converted to LAB, we've got our mask is ready to go. Into that, we start out the same way, create a brand new group for this. We're going to call this group new color. I'm going to load the complete mask that I made. It's at the very bottom. Command click to simply load that as a selection and then apply it as a layer mask to the group. We are going to make a copy of our background shirt now and drag it into the group. And we are going to do the exact same thing we did before. We're going to come up to the image menu, down to adjustments, down to desaturation to completely get rid of the color. And then we're going to rename this DSAT 1. And say OK. We are then going to add our new solid color layer up on top of this guy. So I am going to go solid color layer. I'm going to go with that rose color again. I like that color. So I'm going to do, I'm going to put in LAB values. 73 for my L value, 43 for my A value, and 6 to get my, for the B value. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that guy. We are then going to select the blending mode of this solid color layer to multiply. And then finally, I am going to add another curve on top of this guy just to fine tune my LAB color. So I'm adding a curve on top of this. I am going to put another color sampler point right in the middle of this guy. Again, I wouldn't put a color sampler point on a highlight. I wouldn't put it on a shadow. I'm just putting it right here in the middle of what that normal color should actually be. And again, it needs a small amount of tweaking. It needs a little bit of L. So I'm cranking the L up to 73. And the same thing with the A channel. It needs to go from 42 to 43. And then the B channel as well. Boom. Collapse that group, click on it, call it 183 rows, 183C rows. Dude.
So there's the whole list of Pantone colors. How do you find a specific one in there?
Oh, you got to go searching for them. Most people will have Pantone books. I'm sure there's, I'm sorry, what?
Is there any sort of like a logical order to it?
No, there isn't, but you'll see they're actually in an order. So when you open this thing up and you're actually in the libraries themselves, you'll see as you actually start to scroll through it, it starts out up here in the top. As you start to get up in more intensity and color, you get up into the thousands, but then you'll change color groups and it'll actually start again. You'll start down lower again. So again, once I got into the magenta group, it drops me back down to the 2OC. So no, it's just like running through this stuff. I'm sure there is, you know, the thing about Pantone is they want your money. So to get a Pantone book, to actually buy one of these books, the books themselves are like hundreds and hundreds of dollars. To do it online is hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I mean, that's their business. So it's shocking that they've actually licensed this stuff to Adobe and that's actually a part of it. So no, I can't help you anything more than that. If your client would actually give you the LAB values right off the bat, you'd be a whole lot better off. But anyway, you get where this is all going, right? Okay, so, but let's just make a different color shirt. So I'm going to cancel out of that.
Figure it out.
Oh, and how do you figure it out?
Type the number and it jumps to it.
Perfect. So wait, see, I'm going to buy you the beer now. Okay, so we're in the color swatch library. So type in like a 150, right? 159. Perfect. That's how you get there. You just start typing. You're not typing it in anything, but you've got to make sure again that you're in the correct library. Guys, I've had this fuck so many people up because this is exactly what people use to describe background colors of paint, and they will give you a Pantone color, and I've had people get a coded color. So here, look at this. This is the coded color for 155C, but change this to an uncoded color and type in 155. And you get this completely different color. It's in the same family, but those two are not even same family, possibly, but not really. Makes sense? So just don't let this screw you up. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to come out of here really quick. We're going to simply make a copy of this guy right here. I'm going to turn off my rose color guy. I'm going to open up this guy right here. I'm going to double click on the Pantone color here. I'm going to go to my color libraries to pick a new color one. And I'm going to go for a green shirt here. So I'm going to do a 3375. So if you want the same color as me, just type 3375 and click on it, whatever, and boom, I've got a 3375 shirt. Again, I should have, well, let me go back in and copy down what those colors actually are. So it was a 3375, right? 3375 is an LAB. Oh, and this is a good one to know. This is a good one. In LAB, what ends up happening is lightness works on a scale of 0 to 100. It's just percentage. 0 is black, 100 is white, 50 is middle gray. However, the color on for the A axis and the B axis works in the very center of the axis. Well, here, I'll show you. And we're really doing pretty good. I got time to show you guys one last thing. So in this model right here, white is 100, black is 0. Right here in the center, the AB axis and the B axis and the A axis are also zeroed out right here at the center. As you start moving out to red, you get up to well, let me look and see how it actually is. Yeah, then the A axis negative is green. Okay. So as you move from here to this point right here on the green-red axis, right here in the middle is 0. As you start moving here, these are negative numbers. As you start, well, it's big as life right here in the drawing. Okay, as you start moving in this direction, they are positive values. The same thing happens here. As you start moving towards the yellow, it's a positive value. As you start moving in this direction towards blue, it's a negative B value. So you'll actually see that right here. So the number that we're looking for is, again, is an 83, a minus. So my new number here is an L of 83, a B of minus 36. I'm sorry, an A of minus 36 and a B, what the hell is the B? 5. And so again, that's what you would plug in and that's what you would actually look for. So we're going to say okay to that. The color point is actually still sitting right on there. If I look at my LAB values, I've got an 82 that should be going to 83. I've got a 34. So, I mean, I'm close. I'm within a couple of points of each one of these. But I simply would put another curve on this and get it exactly right. Make sense? Are there questions about this? Okay, finally, last trick on here, hopefully I've got a version of this in here, is, yep, SkinAs Retouch version 3, I think, if you guys can open that guy up. So my issue, you can close up the recoloring part and go home tonight secure in the fact that you can actually get a job when you leave Columbia College in any major city in the world and actually make a decent living for the rest of your life because you can do shit like this and nobody else can.
I don't think we have SkinAs Retouch in there.
Shit.
Is it just like a regular file you can open from the folder? Wait, what's that?
You don't have that in there. All right, well then,
It's in this line.
it's in week 9.
Yes, I'm in the folder. Oh, is there a different?
Did you like add anything to it?
Yes,
Because
there is.
once you've done before.
No, it's the, so wait, I'm in week 9.
Maybe assign the folder.
Yeah, go ahead and open that guy up. Yeah, it hasn't been retouched, but you'll get the same idea. You guys can do it on the unretouched version. I'm going to do it on the retouched version because it looks a little bit nicer. So, shine. That's the one thing that everybody loves. Everybody says, oh, God, I really wish she was, she was not shiny, but that she was glowy. I wish that she would actually glow. What does that really mean in an image like this? And a lot of people would say, well, basically it's contrast. So how would you boost the contrast of this image? Say what?
We're just opening our own up.
Oh, yeah, open your own up. No, this will work great on your own as well. It'll work great on your own. The same thing will happen. If you are going to use your own, do me a favor, select at the very, very top of your own image. So yeah, go ahead and let's do this with your own image. At the very top of your own image, so let me open one that's actually got some layers on mine as well. Well, never mind. I'm just going to open the one I got. So what you want to do for yours is, in order to make this trick work, you need to do a merge stamp version of everything of your final procedure at the very top. So pick your very topmost layer, and again, hold down the Command, Option, Shift, and the letter E, and you will get a merge stamp version of everything at the very top. That's the one that we actually need to work on. But my question back to you again is, how do you make this girl glow? How do you make this? If we were talking about contrast, how would I increase the contrast of this girl? You could do dodging and burning. That's what a lot of people will do. Is a lot of people would put a soft light layer on here, and they would come in any of the areas that are lighter, and they would actually make them lighter. And any of the areas that are darker, they would make them darker. They actually follow what's already on the girl to actually do that. So that would be one way to do it. Any other ways? Contrast. A curve. That's how most people would actually do it, right? They would come in here and put a contrast curve on here. They would come up and they would actually put a curve on here. There are a series of built-in contrast curves, and you can see right here. So we could actually do a medium contrast curve. And if you felt that that was too strong, you could simply drop the opacity of the curve down. And that's how other people would actually do it. I have a problem with this, though. And my problem with this is that it perverts the color. Again, this is the RGB hang-up that we've always got. The minute you put a curve on there to change the tonality of this, you change the color as well. Now, you could change the blending mode of this curve so that it was only affecting the luminosity, which would then not pervert the color so bad. So again, we would have more contrast on here with a less perversion, and that would be an option to do this. But I'm going to show you guys a different way that I do contrast, especially for beauty work. But I've seen, there's a guy who was in my class last semester who was an architectural photographer, and this is the only way he ends up doing contrast anymore. So this is how we actually do it. We are going to load the luminosity of this image as a selection. So to do that, you simply hover over the RGB guy, hold down the Command key, click, and you've loaded the luminosity of this as a selection. Come over to your image right now and jump this to its own layer, Command J. And what you'll actually see if you turn off the base layer image right here is you primarily have your highlights. Because again, when we loaded the luminosity of this, areas that are light load more than areas that are dark. So the white shirt got almost fully loaded. Her eyeballs, though, that are jet black, they are completely blank. There's none of the darkness in this image. That is not here. This is primarily the highlights that we've got going here. Does that make sense to everybody? What's happening? Okay, so I want you to actually call it that. I want you to double click on the layer and rename it highlights. Then I want you to go back down to your background layer and make the background layer active again. This is important. If you try to do this off of your highlights layer, you will screw this up. So make background layer. You don't need to turn the eyeball of highlights off because you haven't changed anything. You just simply need to make sure that you're on this background layer again. We need to do the exact same thing we just did before. We need to load the luminosity of the RGB guide. Command click loads the luminosity of this. However, now we want to invert that selection. We're not inverting the image, we're inverting the selection. So up to the select menu, down to inverse, and jump that to its own layer, Command J. If you do that and then turn off the highlights and turn off the background, you will see that now primarily what we have down here are the shadows. So again, the white shirt does not exist in here. Her white eyeballs don't exist in here. That's all transparent. However, her eyes, the black of the pupil of her eyes, whatever, is almost completely selected in there. The skin, which is a mid-tone, is partially selected in here, exactly the way this should be. Double-click on that and call it shadows. And here's the magic. Go ahead and turn everybody else back on, all three layers on. In your highlights, I want you to change the blending mode of your highlights from normal to screen. And then in your shadows, I want you to change the blending mode of your shadows from normal to multiply. Now we've got a really contrasty image going here. Now there's no hardcore rule about this. The stage of the game that we're at now becomes visual. But the general rule that I have found is that you need half of the correction of the shadows that we're doing than you do highlights. So to get that, if you leave highlights at 100%, change the opacity of your shadows down to 50%, and you'll be closer to where you want to be. Now, some people will say, well, that's still way too contrasty. So to keep this ratio between highlights going and control the whole overall thing, you want to put these into a group. So if you hold down your Shift key and click on highlights so that highlights and shadows are both selected, come to your drop-down menu right here and come out and do New Group from Layers. It will actually offer to name the group, and you want to call it Contrast. And say, okay. Those two are now sitting inside here. The highlights are still at 100%. The shadows are still at 50%. But now you can actually control the opacity of the entire group. So you keep the ratio of highlights to shadows. So my question to you is, even at that 100 and not, when you turn this off, are you kidding me? Game changer. That's a glowy girl. That's not a contrast curve that just got put on there, right? That's actually how you do contrast. Well, again, I started doing it for beauty. I do it pretty much for everything right now. Oh, the shirts that we were just doing, this is actually how I bump the contrast of the shirts. It's the same thing. Same method. Are there questions about this? So for next week, your assignment, if we look on our Moodle site, oh, drop your homework really quick, if you will, for me, please. And I think this is going to be your last assignment for this class. There are other assignments on here that I don't think I'm going to make you do because I want you guys working on your final projects. Okay, they're on there. We are still going to do work here in class. So next week, I need you to bring working anything that you've got going for your final project. If you haven't shot anything, that's fine. You can bring me a tear sheet that says, this is what I'm thinking about doing, or you can bring me anything. It has to be visual. It doesn't have to be yours. If you've got work that you're working on, please bring that in. It can be contact sheets, a Lightroom catalog. It doesn't matter. At any rate, there is a group of files that are in your assignment folder. One of them is this file, and you need to smooth that swimsuit out to look like this. This is a reference picture for you. If you look at the assignment folder, it's right here. It's inside this capture folder. The one that you're going to actually do, I forget which one it is. It's listed in the assignment. You will notice that there are other, it's this guy right here. You'll notice that there are other images in that folder, which should be a hint for you. So anyway, that's it. And I'll see you guys next week. And I'll switch this out so you can see if your homework got dropped. And everybody got signed in, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna show him.